Yo, how's it going, guys? As promised, I'm going to be giving you a Resto Shaman guide. Doing this one day before 10.1.5. But it doesn't really matter because I think there's basically no changes. I think there's just maybe like a little bit of a damage increase or something for Resto Shaman, but it should be completely irrelevant. So if you guys are familiar with any of my guides, I kind of like have this little outline here to show the order in which I'm going to be talking about everything in case you want to kind of like skip along in the video. You don't really care about some of the early stuff, or maybe you want to, backtrack and try and find where I'm talking about. But I always start my guys out the same way. I go over like, kind of the basic stuff. If you guys have never seen one of my guides before, I definitely want you to not miss out on that, when I'm showing like my add-ons and macros and things like that. But first of all, I just want to kind of talk about the pros and cons of Resto Shamans. The main thing with Resto Shamans is I still kind of think they're actually a little bit weaker on the healing end to some of the stronger healers in terms of like how much throughput they could put out, but their tools really come down to it's just a utility. Like Lightning Lasso is insane, the knock is really good, the static is really good, you still have Wind Shear, which is super good for trying to shut casters down, you still have Grounding Totem, you got Tremor Totem, you have a super short cooldown on Root, which is like kind of disruptive to melee. But I would say like their number one like pro is that it kind of like helps your team get momentum. I don't think you could, if you have a lot of globals in Resto Shaman, you actually can do a lot of damage, especially if you play a damage spec. It's kind of impossible to do, though. I was actually spec'd a damage spec right now. Maybe in like some sort of 2 setting or something you could do it, but whenever I try and play like the damage build, I always feel like I'm so behind on globals and I just end up like falling super far behind. But yeah, Lava Burst can pump. But yeah, it kind of feels like the healer that can kind of help your team be more aggressive. By getting CC out on enemies and using like Wind Shear, Grounding, Tremor to kind of keep them out of crowd control. And some of the cons are, I know, like, contrary to what happened in the tournament, with me doing like a crazy amount of healing and dampening, they actually kind of do get dampened. I think Resto Druids can outlast Resto Shamans. I think Evokers can outlast Resto Shamans. And those are kind of the two like best healers right now, at least in the tournament meta. So I guess I'm really kind of comparing them to those two. Resto Shaman might actually be considered like the third best healer, but yeah, maybe not in 10.1.5. I think Holy Pallies and Holy Priest might actually go over them. But yeah, you do kind of get dampened by some of those other classes. A lot of your healing is kind of like back into the casted form, which is great. Because it feels really, really good when you can get the cast off, and it also feels really good when you get your Nature Swiftness off. 300,000 non-crit Nature Swiftness right there. Also, another thing, like another like hard con that Resto Shamans have always had is that they've actually generally been really bad into melee cleaves. Thankfully, melee cleaves don't really exist right now. This is not really a melee cleave meta. So, yeah, basically one of their biggest weaknesses is completely removed from the game at the moment, at least during in this meta. So Resto Shamans overall are pretty good. They're, like I said, I think they might be the third best healer. I think they do less healing than our Druid and Preservation, and you probably get dampened by both of them. But I definitely do think there's like matchups where they are really important, which was showcased in this weekend because I actually prefer Preservation over Resto Shaman. And in the tournaments this weekend, I played Resto Shaman every single game because I think Resto Shaman's better into Sub Rogue, Resto Shaman's better into Boomkin because you have the Spirit Walk talent. You can immediately just kind of, sprint out of those root beams when Preservations get stuck in them. And, you're not as susceptible to swaps on Arshan because you have extra stamina. You have the Nature's Guardian, which gives you a little bit of healing. So if you've seen my guys before, I talked about the add-ons. They're exactly the same on this character, so we're just going to kind of cruise through them. Big debuff shows the bigger debuffs on my party frames. That kind of like shows the important ones, highlights like kidney shots, cyclones, polymorphs, things like that. Makes it easier to recognize when to dispel people. Details is down here. Allows you to kind of like analyze your games a little bit better. Diminish options. You can set this up like in many different ways, but I have it set up to just kind of like show like stun DR and sheep DR on myself and my teammates to like recognize like, okay, if you're fighting a sub-rogue, they can't kill us for 8 more seconds. We're still on stun DR, things like that. Nameplate buffs is my nameplate buff add-on. Simple enough. Omnibar shows the kicks at the bottom. Omni CD shows my friendly party CD. I have it like at the top of the raid frame. If it hasn't been fixed, Party Pet Fix shows pets in the raid frames. S Arena is my enemy unit frame add-on. S Arena updated, excuse me. Trophy is what I use to help you guys like understand what globals I'm using, and then weak auras are obviously the Optimus Prime that you need in WoW. It's just complete robot. Like, you see all this stuff, it just does everything for you. It lets me know when my elemental shields are missing, you know, Nature's Guardian cooldown, when I proc precog, all that good stuff. If you ever in my stream chat, exclamation WA at any time, and you could take my entire, you know, healer weak aura package. Macros, I don't think I use any crazy macros on Shaman by any means, just a lot of like at cursor macros. Dispel Party 1. So if you're curious like why this macro is written weird, it's Purify Spirit and Cleanse Spirit are different if you're different specs, I'm pretty sure. Maybe that's not like that anymore this expansion, but that's why there's an extra line here. And this is a help harm macro, so basically if anyone in your party gets mind controlled, you can use your same button that would, you know, purify them to purge them. You could purge mind control. So I just kind of put a help harm in there, and it just makes it super fast, super smooth. Someone gets mind controlled, boom, you press your same button you would normally do to dispel them, and you purge them. Bada bing, bada boom. Static field at cursor, earth grab at cursor. Nature swiftness with obviously the Swifty one-shot nature swiftness macro. Yeah, this is how you get those juiced up nature swiftnesses. You got your badge, you got your blood fury. And then all of a sudden, you know, that 9,000 intellect is 12,000, 9,800. It's the 12,000 intellect right there. It's definitely how you amp those NSs up really, really well. I would definitely recommend that. Projection at cursor, lava burst at targeted target, dispel, harm, and friendly. So if I target a friendly, it dispels. If I target an enemy, it purges. Lasso healing rain macro. You shouldn't really play healing rain, so this is completely irrelevant, but if you target a friendly, you can use Healing Rain. If you target an enemy, you can use Lasso, and the Healing Rain is at cursor. I don't use Healing Rain. We'll talk about that later in the guide. This is just a help harm macro with Healing Lightning Bolt, Healing Wave Lightning Bolt. Focus Wind Shear, Dispel Party 2, Focus, Focus Hex, Focus Purge, Dispel Self, Arena Shear 1, 2, 3. Would definitely recommend using Arena Shear 1, 2, 3. It just makes it, you know. Arena Shear 1, 2, 3 is when I started like feeling like I was able to kind of reach like a, you know, peak that I have not hit before in Resto Shaman, where, you know, you're fighting wizards and, you know, you could just kind of see all the casts all times. Like, you're getting Hex, boom, you shear. You're getting Clone, boom, you shear. You're getting Feared, boom, you shear. You don't need to really worry about having the right person on the right focus. Definitely would recommend it. Curse of Spirit Link Totem, stop casting Grounding Totem. This is like, you know, if you're casting a heal or something, and, you know, someone's like casting CC on you, it just immediately cancels your cast and just uses the grounding totem. I have a couple macros like that. I think it's also in like my earthen and whatnot. Earthen here, stop casting. This is also puts the world marker down if you have any interest in that. It's not showing here because I'm not in a raid, but it's all good. Cursor Earthbind Totem. Earthbind is also Earth Grab as soon as you spec into it. Stop casting Astral Shift. I've had an issue with that before, so I put it in there. Stop casting Tremor Totem. Same with that. Target to target Flame Shock. This is actually a macro for a wall and Battle Master, which I'm not currently using, but I kinda, there's like points in my career where like if I get stunned, like I'm spamming my wall and my Battle Master out of a stun and just like wouldn't go at the same time, so I made a macro for it. I have a macro here for just NSing without using Ancestral Guidance because I do have it macroed in. This is, yeah, there's a Ancestral Guidance macroed into this NS. It's not super important to have the other macro. I'm just, sometimes I min-max just like a tiny bit. But yeah, you definitely want the Ancestral Guidance macroed into that Nature Swiftness. Then every other Nature Swiftness you get is going to be like super, super big. Race. So race for Resto Shaman, I have to say, generally speaking, Orc is probably just going to straight up be the best because stun reduction is super good. And sub-rogues are just an absolute menace to the community. Some secondary options are potentially, you know, Dark Iron Dwarf. I like Dwarf or Dark Iron Dwarf. It doesn't really matter too much. You're trying to get the same value out of it. Basically, you can dispel silences from Shadow Priest. You can dispel Strangulates, which will actually be maybe a lot more relevant in 10.1.5 because Death Knights will become more of a thing. And then other than that, like Drain Eye for a little bit of extra intellect and the hot. But like I said, personally, I just think Orc is kind of the best overall. I wouldn't really recommend Tauren Troll or, you know, Tauren Troll or whatever other troll that is. Panda's just not super useful. I think the most value you're probably going to get is Orc or Dark Iron Dwarf. So for stat priority and enchant, so this is actually the first time in the season, actually, excuse me, this is like, I think maybe the first time ever in, like, not even just the season, my career playing Resto Shaman, where I actually started playing with a little bit of haste. I wasn't really playing a lot of Resto Shaman at the start of the season, and I kind of like wasn't, like, I kind of fell off a little bit. Like, I didn't really think I was, like, super good at it anymore. And I was kind of, like, you know, just beating my head in a little bit. Like, man, like, Resto Shaman just doesn't feel good to me. I do so much more healing on the Preservation Evoker. And on the Tournament Realm, I noticed that Brain and Sturge were actually, you know, opting to get some haste. It wasn't like it wasn't a ton of haste, but it was some haste. And, you know, I kind of just followed suit, and I was like, listen, I'll give this a try. And after getting just some haste, like I play around like the 10% mark, it just, for some reason, it just made the class feel so much more smooth. And even more so when your heals like got changed to like have like a little bit more casted. So I think having like some haste is very valuable. I think like I wanted like around 10% haste, 100% mastery, and 30% verse. Those numbers can be like, you know, kind of bounced around a little bit. Like right now my mastery is a little bit higher than my verse. Like I could probably interchange some stuff to get that around there, but this is just like the general, you know, these stats look good line. The water that you use is called Dragon Spittle. It's on the auction house. It's a question that I get, you know, where do you get your water from? Don't buy it from the vendor. Go to the auction house, buy the Dragon Spittle. It gives you more mana back than the vendor water. But jumping into crafted gear here, personally, I like the Draconithist Arm Guards, Adaptive Draconithist Arm Guards. These are actually really solid. If you haven't played with them, you definitely want to give them a look. So, like, for example, this is the last game here. I mean, this is the last game we played in this tournament. This is 13 minutes long. We'll go ahead and look at our buff up time on these things. And there's going to be two. So 20% on one and 22% on the other. So, you know, 1/5 of the game, I just have an additional 1,200 stats. That's a lot of freaking stats for 1/5 of the game. And I'm not a target in these, so like they actually give you even more value when you are a target, because what happens is when you get attacked, you get the verse and crit, and then when you have that crit, you crit more, which when you crit, you proc mastery and haste, and it just kind of helps you. So I think those are really good. And then obviously I think the boots are really good as well. We can maybe look at the buff up time of those. What are they called? What are they called? I wonder if they're called metal. They might be called metal. Yeah, I think it might be called metal. So about 20% uptime on the additional intellect. And then you could try precog if you like it. I personally don't play precog. And if you ever need it, you could play Spore Cloak if you're like dying to sub-rogues, things like that. I normally will just take off the legs or the boots. Generally, I kind of just take the boots off. But yeah, this is like, I guess, my ideal set. And my haste is a little bit higher, and my verse is 29, and my mastery is 26, so there's a world where I probably should lose a little bit of haste somehow to gain like mastery and verse. So if I wanted to, I could get more mastery by using like a crafted ring like this, but then something like this. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of lazy. Mastery buff above 90% I think is generally pretty bad because I don't actually think you're always over 90%. But yeah, you can see what I'm crafted to here. I got crafted helm, haste mastery, PvP neck, crafted shoulders with mastery verse, PvP cloak, PvP chest, crafted bracers, regular weapon. This is actually the haste verse scale warden. You could use the crit one if you want. I just don't think crit is personally that good. I think the on-use trinket is super important because you want it with that nature swiftness every time. Like having that extra intellect on that nature swiftness, man, is how you get shit done. PvP ring, crafted boots, crafted legs versus mastery, yeah, and yeah, haste mastery here, haste mastery here. But like I said, you could kind of mix it up a little bit. I wonder, I could actually probably even maybe change some gems or enchants around. No, it doesn't look like I can. Yeah, whatever. Can maybe take haste off here and put verse in, and then yeah, but I don't know. It's all good. I also get a little bit more verse because I play with the Boomkin, so it's like one of the things that I'm not super worried about, actually. We'll talk about tier gear. Unfortunately, Resto Shamans have no tier this season. Tier gear is absolutely useless. I used one piece on live because I got it for free, you know, from getting 1600 or whatever, and it has like stats I liked, which is haste mastery, but overall, tier does absolutely nothing. We'll talk about it in a second. And it's crazy to think that Resto Shamans are what I consider to be a top 3 healer when you literally use no tier. You have no tier bonuses. Like, that blows my mind. It's crazy. If you ever want to see your tier gear, you could do a little cheat here. Go to Raids, go to Shadowlands, go to Loot, then go to Item Sets, and then it's right here. So keep in mind that they're nerfed by 50% in PvP. So when you cast Healing Rain on an ally with Riptide, they are immediately healed by, for, this says 38,000. So in PvP, it'd be like 19,000 or something. Probably a little bit higher with higher item level, but basically nothing. Like, you know, they are healed for nothing. Like, that's essentially what it says. And you already don't play Healing Rain. And then your 4 set is also, you know, increase your healing done by a little bit, you know, makes your next heal for a little bit more. It's really not great. And not only that, like, you have to be like, okay, like, well, I guess we got to spec into Healing Rain now, and then also you got to change your Honor Talent, and then also spec into, you know, Rain Dance, and to have to do so much to even activate your bonus in changing your talent points. And I mean, honestly, the reality is if you want Healing Rain, you might as well get Acid Rain. Do you take Overflowing Shores? You know, it goes on and on. When your bonus isn't even that great to begin with, it kind of stinks. And then on top of that, you know, look at the stats on it. Haste Verse, you know, that's okay. Crit Haste, you don't really like crit. Crit Verse, you don't really want the crit. Crit Verse, you don't really want the crit. And then Haste Masterpiece, so you know, a lot of it's just stats are kind of stinky. The set pieces, the set bonuses are kind of stinky, and overall, it's just not great. On top of the fact that Healing Rain, anyone who plays Resto Shaman knows the burden of people running out of your Earthen Totem, okay? Let me tell you something. They run out of your Healing Rain even more, okay? It's like, you know, it just pushes them out, you know? Nobody wants to be in that rain, okay? They're bringing their umbrellas, all right? So it's just honestly kind of tragic. Yeah, I mean, that's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to get into what they could do because that's a topic for another day. So Spec and Honor Talents. Let me go ahead and do this here. Spec and Honor Talents. So I would say this is like pretty like standard of a spec. I have some flex points. So for example, you know, sometimes I will decide to drop the Stormkeeper and play this. You know, I have played, you know, quote unquote aggressive builds before where, you know, I do some like weird stuff like this. And, you know, you have the Lava Surge and you get more healing when you Lava Burst, and that doesn't really feel that amazing if I'm being 100% honest. Maybe something in like 2s you could do that. But I would say like generally I only change like this point in this talent tree, where either I just take the 5% more stamina or I try and, you know, help assist my teams with kills with this Stormkeeper. And I will say personally that I think improved Primordial Wave is incredible. Buffing your NS to be as powerful as it can is super important. But another thing that I want to say is Continuous Waves is a super good talent. Having Primordial Wave on a 30-second cooldown is incredible for multiple reasons. Those reasons being, sometimes you're trying to set up an NS and you Primordial and you unleash and like something happens, maybe they use a cooldown, maybe those heals both crit, and you're like, you know what, I don't really want an NS right now. It doesn't feel that bad to just let your Primordial Wave reset. Another thing is that when you use the Nature Swiftness, you get the Primordial in between the Nature Swiftness. And when you're playing without this talent, there's this weird, like, there's this really weird, like, awkward scenario where your Primordial comes up without your Nature Swiftness, and there's a 15-second gap. And if you feel like you need healing, you kind of are like, should I throw out the should I throw out the Primordial? And then you throw out the Primordial, and then your NS comes off cooldown, and you don't have the Primordial. And guys, you really never want to NS without Primordial. Like, sometimes you have to. I literally had to do it in a tournament at 60% dampening, but it feels so bad every time. This is a 60% modifier, even more in some cases. So this talent, I think, is super good. Definitely worth trying. And then over on the left-hand side of the tree, I mean, these are just all flex points. Like, I personally always keep this here. I actually drop Purge in some of my matches and tournaments, but, you know, I don't always need... Well, generally speaking, I actually do this. I actually play Aura Mastery, the Mana Spring, but sometimes you do need the Mana Spring. So right now I'm Decursed. So, like, let's say we fight against a Sub-Rogue. You know, you can play something like this. Let's say you fight against a Sub-Rogue Boomkin. Well, now you need to get out of Roots. And then I play, you know, I play like this, for example. You know, you like the Poison Cleansing, and yeah. But generally speaking, like, I'll just show you the talents that you do want. Like for example, like a Shuffle spec. Like, what would I spec for Soul Shuffle? Let me see here. I think this is like what I would spec for Soul Shuffle. I've been kind of using Creation Core over other thing. This is just like a pretty general spec. If you're ooming, you know, for example, I fought like, you know, the Shadow Play in the tournament. I take out Aura Mastery for Mana Spring. If you need Decurse, you could just move this talent point over here. But yeah, it's just a bunch of flex talent points where, you know, Stone Skin's really great in the melee. So like if I was playing against, you know, you know, melee or something like that, like boom, you can put that there. You can still have that in the R mastery. If you don't need, you know, if you don't need decurse or stone skin, you can put it here. But yeah, this is basically like a lot of this isn't, you know, moved around. And when I said I play without purge, like I'll show you here. Okay, so basically you can get a couple more talent points in the lower end of the tree. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 points. In the mirror versus Sturge, I actually recognized that I did not need Tremor Totem, so I actually saved some points by doing like this. I actually spec'd in a cap, and I literally never used it, but now we had all these talent points freed up, I'm pretty sure. Like, we were able to just get I was able to get so many more talent points, because I was just like, you know what, I'm never purging in this mirror, because the purge protection from Boomkin, you know, crit R is too strong. I dropped Tremor Totem because it was completely worthless, and, you know, I think my spec was actually, you know, like a talent point better in the mirror. I feel like I just basically had like one whole talent point extra than he did. And I think, what did that allow me to get? It allowed me to get like poison cleansing and totemic recall and all that. So yeah, so just a couple flex points. You could be, you know, kind of creative with that. But yeah, over here I would just mainly say continuous waves, I think, is like kind of a overlooked talent. And using it in between your NS. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Really good. And I'm going to talk about honor talents a little bit here. So I would say generally these are the 3 that I run. If you ever find yourself not needing grounding totem because you're queuing into something that doesn't, you know, need ground, I mean, you could play Unleash Shield. If you're getting attacked a lot, you can play Burrow. I actually played Sky Fury as Boomy Sub-Rogue and dropped Static Field, even though Static Field is super good. I just kind of, you know, went with a gut call. Unleash Shield still decent. Rain Dance, you're just not overplaying because you're not healing Rain. Season Winds, you know, you're just not really a target too often to get a ton of value from that. But I do think that Static Field is generally the best. It's also super disruptive and can literally just win you games if you can static people behind a pillar and then like toss that Earth Grab after. Healing Rotation. Oh, I guess we're going to talk about it right now. Healing Rotation. It's really simple. Is really simple. In my last Resto Shaman guide, one of the things I talked about was to never overlap a healing stream. That's because your 2-set bonus gave you 10% crit when you had a healing stream totem down. That's not necessarily the case anymore. It's actually okay to overlap healing streams. I just don't do it that often. I only do it when I'm like in need of like, you know, like desperate need of healing. But Earth Shield's always up on your main target. Riptide is going on CD. Earth Living is going... Unleash Life is going off on CD, and Healing Stream is also going off on CD. So just general rotation here. You get Riptides up. You have a Healing Stream down. You should always have a one Healing Stream down on CD every single time. And then there, it's just like what I kind of like to do with my my Unleash here is when I have 2 charges of Riptide, I like to Riptide, Unleash Riptide. Riptide, Unleash Riptide, so it kind of feels like it gives you like more of a span of like instant heals. Another really good way to use the Unleash Riptide is to use it on not your main target. So like if you're kind of like having this weird like game where like your team's kind of rotting a little bit, you want to actually Unleash Riptide your off target, because you're constantly reapplying Riptide on your main target. And if you unleash your Riptide, not only does it buff its initial heal, it actually buffs its hot. So let's just say this is Sam, you know, standing in the middle of the map, like not using any defensive cooldowns and just dying, you know, and this is Trill. I can toss an Unleash Riptide onto Trill to help him, like, kind of like, you know, level out a little bit. It's 35% increase, and then we just get to keep kind of like Riptiding Sam over and over again, and we don't have to worry about reapplying the hot. So this is 2,700 versus this is 3,600. It's pretty decent. Sometimes you do need to, you know, use the Unleash Riptide on your main target just for the initial heal, and you take the hot off anyway. That's okay. I'm just saying, like, if you're in like one of those rot games, tossing out that Unleash Riptide is pretty nice to do. In terms of rotation, yeah, I mean, it's really just use Riptide on CD, obviously really obvious. Healing Stream on CD, Unleash on CD, and then in terms of like Healing Surge and Healing Wave, Surge is faster, Wave is slower, more efficient. It's that simple, you know. The choice between are you going to Healing Surge or are you going to Healing Wave is really just up to your discretion, depending on the situation, on how urgent it is to get heals out. Obviously, if you ever have a Primordial active, you want to try and always go for that Healing Wave, so you know, you get the added bonus of the double heal, essentially. It's kind of interesting here because, you know, all my things are just kind of lined up right here. You got the 1, you got the 2, you got the 3, and then, you know, it's just the cast and heals, and you will have to cast some heals. Damage rotation, I mean, you don't really have that many options. There's only a couple things I could really tell you about the damage rotation. You know, Stormkeeper is obviously great if you're spec'd into it. You can just kind of like load that up behind a pillar. You don't have to worry about, you know, like, you know, giving your, or exposing your healing tree, and then just kind of pop out and just, you know, hit him with the 1-2. The other thing that you have is you have Lightning Lasso. You're probably going to use that more for like a stun than actual DPS. If you want to stun people, pretty self-explanatory. And I would say like the main thing I could tell you about Lava Burst is don't worry about going for the Flame Shock first. Flame Shock after the Lava Burst. It's always going to crit. I think that's like the main thing, you know. It feels like kind of clunky when you Flame Shock and then you Lava Burst. It doesn't feel like as effective. It's going to feel way more effective if you actually just Lava Burst and then Flame Shock while the Lava Burst is in the air, and then you're always going to get the crit. So if you're ever trying to just turn and do damage, cast the Lava Burst and then Flame Shock right after, and it's going to feel more bursty. Instead of using 2 globals, it's essentially going to give you the burst in 1 global. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the cooldown rotation now. And my goodness, it feels like there's a lot of cooldowns. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to go like through the motions of like how I would just play a regular game, okay? So first things first, if I was playing Creation Core, you want to reset a healing stream on top of an Earthern. But if you're not playing Creation Core and you're only playing Totemic Recall, you always want to reset Earthern. Earthern is the reset. Earthern is definitely the key here. So like, let's just say this is the start of the game. Generally speaking, you get a healing stream down, game starts, you get an Earthern down, you're just going to always Totemic Recall that first Earthern. You know what I mean? And then also when I'm playing the double one, I just get 2 healing streams down immediately. That's kind of what I was telling you about. Sometimes you can just get the double healing stream down because you never want to have 2 charges available. So you're basically always starting the game with Earthern, reset, and then you have another Earthern immediately after that, okay? Generally speaking, the next cooldown that I'm going to probably use is it depends on the situation. If it's like kind of like single targety, Primordial NS, or a Healing Tide. If it's kind of like single targety and, you know, bursty, you could go for the Primordial NS. It's a 1-minute cooldown, or you could try and be preemptive with the Healing Tide. And it's really important to kind of be proactive with the Earthern and be proactive with the Healing Tide. And like the Primordial is more of a like a oh shit, like I'm gonna top the fucking shit out of us button, okay? So yeah, so like that's kind of like how you want it. You want to like drop the Earthern, get the reset, you know, maybe drop a Healing Tide once you start taking a splash of damage, drop the next Earthern, and then if you have the Primordial NS still, it's probably next Primordial NS if still have. And then if you don't still have it, that's when you're going to be looking for the Ascendance, maybe Naked Primordial into Aura Healing Wave. So for example, you know, let's just say you use your Primordial Nature Swiftness, but your Primordial's off CD. You can just do like a Naked Primordial and go for like, you know, Ascendance, fucking Spirit Walker's Graced Healing Wave. Or you could even just save the Ascendance, and I'll talk about how I like to use my Ascendance in a second here. But yeah, this is kind of like the standard game. So like, let's just, once again, let's just reset and we'll go through the motions. And then generally, and I mean generally, linking Last Resort, okay? But there's definitely times where like even, for example, in a tournament, like what the first cooldown I used was literally a Trinket link. It's because we didn't have an Earthern down. We didn't have the pre-Healing Tide down. I couldn't Trinket and then Primordial and then Unleash and then Nature Swiftness, right? Like you needed that exact on-demand burst healing. So this isn't like how you should always do it, but I will say, generally speaking, like this is probably how a game is going to go. So game started, I get a Riptide up, All right, I'm going to put my healing stream down behind the pillar. I'm going to drop an Earthern on my partner. I'm going to instantly reset. I'm going to drop the second healing stream here. All right, you know, we're taking some damage. Like, okay, a bunch of cooldowns are popped. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and drop my Healing Tide here. Earthern's still up for a few more seconds. You know, my partner ran out of it. It's Sam I Am. You know, I'll throw it at him. He's just going to run out of that one as well, so we'll just toss out our next Earthern. And then, like, oh my god, you know, we're still taking a bunch of damage. Primordial, this is really important. You Primordial, then you Unleash, and you actually want to make sure you have Riptides up on a lot of targets. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you Nature Swiftness, okay? The Nature Swiftness is obviously macroed in with, like, the Swifty one-shot healing. So, you know, right now you're just, you know, keeping healing streams down, trying to watch out. All right, you take your next splash of damage. You have a Primordial coming up. Do you want to Ascendance this? Let's go ahead and choose not to Ascendance this one, okay? So we're going to go for our next Primordial. We're going to go for an Unleash. And then we're going to go for a Healing Wave with Aura Mastery. Can't be stopped. And, you know, hopefully we're still kind of chilling by now. And now our next set of CDs is going to be, we have an Earthen coming up. We have an Ascendance Primordial NS. And basically what this is going to do is your first NS is with Ancestral Guidance. Your second NS is going to be with the Ascendance. The Ascendance is just a better version of the Ancestral Guidance. These are two of the most absolute swift one-shot heals you could ever imagine in the history of the game. Let's go and Flame Shot this guy right here because he's a freaking... No, I'm just kidding. Healing streams are down. All right, here we go. We have a Ascendance here. We have a Primordial. We have an Unleash. And we have a Nature Swiftness. Boom. Top the whole world. Poggers in the chat. So this is generally how it's going to look. And now... we're pretty dry on CDs at this point. You know, we're kind of hoping maybe they didn't go this fast in terms of using all of our CDs. But, you know, we do have a Healing Tide coming up. We might have to pair that with the next link. But this is really like a super standard game of, like, how you're going to rotate cooldowns. And I feel like, generally speaking, like, these cooldowns rotate really well. Mana efficiency. This is an interesting one. I mean, I really don't know what I could say for mana efficiency. There's two mana talents you have. Resurgence, number one, must play. Mana Spring, if you ever lose games on mana, must play. And then other than that, you can only really make sure that you have Water Shield up at all times, okay? Other things in terms of efficiency are obviously, like, pairing your cooldowns really well. Like, make sure you're Primordialing with your Nature Swiftness. Make sure you're Nature Swiftnessing around the 1 minute mark every single time. A lot of people are like, Cdew, how did you keep your team alive with no mana? Guess what? Nature Swiftness literally makes your heal cost no mana. So if you're using Nature Swiftness, like, pretty frequently in those long games, that is going to save you a ton of mana, especially when you're just, like, powering it up with all these modifiers. You want to try and, like, make sure you get the most effectiveness out of your heals. So, like, if you can, like, try and be a little extra efficient, you could Unleash before you go for, like, a Healing Surge or something like that to try and get a little bit extra juice in that Healing Surge. But yeah, I think that's obviously, you know, there's not really too much you can do in terms of mana efficiency, besides playing the mana talents and just make your heals heal for as much as possible with all the modifiers. What I wanted to talk about here is the importance of making sure you actually have Riptide on multiple targets when you're doing the Primordial NS and when you're doing the you know, Ascendance Primordial NS. And the reason why is because all the extra healing you get goes into the Ancestral Guidance and the Ascendance to make it so you get more healing. So, for example, we're just going to use really simple numbers here, okay? So, your NS heals for 100k, all right? And then you get 60k from Primordial, okay? So, this is just one target. If you have those two extra people that have a Riptide, they also get healed for 60k. So instead of just healing someone for 160k and getting 25% of that split on your entire team, you healed someone for 280k because of the extra primordials there. So that builds into the Ancestral Guidance and also builds into the Ascendance. So you have a Riptide here, you have a Riptide here, you primordial yourself, and then you get ready to just send it. Okay, so you see all those extra ticks of Ancestral Guidance? That's because the Riptides were on everyone. And that's the Swifty one-shot heal right there. You get the Healing Wave for 240k. It procs to 75k. That procs a 143k. That procs 143k. That procs 149k. That procs 149k. And it's literally just raining heals. And then you do the same exact thing with Ascendant. So you just want to make sure that you have Riptide up on many targets. It's unbelievable. So positioning and how to avoid CC. I mean, generally speaking, positioning on Resto Shaman, I don't know. It kind of depends on the pace of the match. Like, I don't really think, like, at a high level, you can win games by, you know, quote-unquote, dampening on Resto Shaman, which means I'm generally trying to position more aggressively. But I would say, like, generally speaking, you're probably going to want to be in a little bit more of a defensive position to avoid CC, and you have a ton of tools to avoid CC. I mean, the pillar can definitely be your best friend. If someone comes chasing you, you can knock them, you know, you could static them and throw them, then you could root them, and then you can, like, hit them over here and hit them with a lasso, and then if they're trying to fear you, you could drop a Tremor Totem, walk in front of it. If they walk behind, try and kill your Tremor Totem, you know, you throw it over here. Like, you could be so difficult to crowd control on a Resto Shaman. You can be so frustrating for people to actually get CC on, that being in a defensive position and using your utility is just absolutely insane. When to avoid CC, this was written for Evoker, so you know it's a little bit different because you're always in line of sight with it for Evoker. But when to avoid CC, whenever you can, and then you know kind of going back to how to avoid CC. You have so many tools. Just do your best to understand what you can do. You have shear, you have ground, you have tremor, you have knock, you have static cling, you have root, and then you also have lightning lasso. You know, there's definitely times where you know I'm queuing against Peekaboo, and this guy wants to come over and blind me, and I'm just you know I can't press lasso on him. I'm like, you know what, Peekaboo, I'm gonna wrangle your ass up. Why can't I press lasso? I'm not specking to it. Come here. Come here, Peekaboo. I'm about to wrangle that ass. You know, you hit him with the lightning lasso. You try and deny his go a little bit. You put a static field on him. You throw it over there. Then you put a root here. Then he steps over here. Then you knock him. Like, you just want to do everything you can. You have a ton of utility. Utility CC being offensive. This is a. We'll talk about utility in a second here. But you know, CC. You have lightning lasso. You can use your statics in an incredible way. I love doing it. I kind of like. You know, got the idea from Sturge after he bullied me in one series where he was just kind of throwing me behind pillars. You have the static, lightning lasso, earth grab, hex. In terms of damage, I would say it's kind of easier to get like a Stormkeeper burst whenever it's relevant. But like when to damage, you just got to be careful with it because I feel like using offensive globals really does put you really far behind. So it's kind of like one of those things that you could try your best to juggle. If you lose a game, you know, think, was there moments in that game where I could have helped, like, contribute for a kill, like, you know, with, you know, hexes, with statics, with lassos, you know, with stormkeepers, with lava bursts, things like that. I definitely noticed myself, like, for example, when my team plays Rogue Boomkin and we play into Wizards as Resto Shamans, we were just losing because I was, like, in a defensive position all the time. I wasn't trying to help get CC. I would just run out of mana. So versus, you know, some of those Wizards, even though it's scary, I was trying to get myself into the fight and get, you know, good statics out, good lassos out. It's kind of important to, like, recognize, I guess, like, your win condition. Utility for Resto Shaman, we've been talking about nonstop. I mean, you have so much. You have knock, you have lasso, you have static, which is a new addition. A lot of people, this is definitely, you know, a very common question. A lot of people ask, how do you throw your static? I don't know the exact range on it. But basically, it's not very far. You can only throw it from one spot to another, like in a very small radius to actually make it pull people. I don't know if it's 10 yards, it's 15 yards. You can kind of mess around it for max distance. But if you throw it like one step too far, even though the static moves, the people don't move with it. I don't know why it works that way. It just does work that way. So it's not a huge distance. I just basically never try to like overdo it. You should be using Earth Grab a lot. That's one of the things that when I started playing Resto Shaman again this patch, I didn't use it a ton because it literally had like a 56-second cooldown last patch, or when I first played it, now it's got a 24-second cooldown, so you literally just toss it out all the time. So dealing with kicks is something that, you know, this is just a tale as old as time. You know, how do you deal with kicks? I mean, first thing you could try and do is you can ground if it's you know, a spellcaster kick, and you know you have those 3 seconds where they can't interrupt you. Other than that, you just got to try and do your best to fake. You also have the Spirit Walker's Grace, but you have to try and do the best you can to fake. And the main thing about faking is recognizing when kicks are available. You know, you don't want to sit here and spam fake if people don't even have kicks available. And you also want to try not to have the same pattern. You know, if you're faking late every single time, people might just not kick you. You know, maybe sometimes you want to sneak through and just go for those casts. And, you know, if you get kicked, you can actually Primordial. So, like, maybe your plan's like, listen, I'm going to cast the heal here. If he kicks me, I'm going to use a Primordial in the lockout, and I'm just going to come out using Nature Swiftness. But just try and be, like, a little different with your fake pattern. You know, you can fake quick, you can fake late, you can fake in the middle, but don't always fake the same way, because if people kind of catch on to how you fake, they can really abuse you. It's like, you know, it's like a poker face, you know what I mean? You don't want them to have your tell. How to kite well and survive. This is something that literally before I even started the guide, I said I don't even know. And the reason why is because no one plays melee cleaves these days, man. People just don't attack you. I'm going to assume that if you wanted to kite well and survive, and we'll actually talk about honor talents here in a second because it'll kind of, play into it a little bit, is you can play burrow instead of static field. If there's nothing you ground, you could play burrow and static field. Then you could burrow, you can get away. If people get to you, you can knock. If they get back to you, you could static and toss them away. Then you could root them. So burrow definitely really solid. But not only that, you can literally even pick up Gust to Win if you wanted to, If I were to pick up Gust to Win, I mean, I could just do it right here. If we need to drop one talent, I'd probably drop this. I actually really like the Totem Reset. But now you have Gust to Win. So you have the ability to actually get distance that way. You could also play, like, instead of, like, the Chain Lightning and the extra stam, you could literally play Thunderous Pulse to help give you, like, a little freedom. Things like that. So there's definitely a bunch of talents that you can play that would help you survive melee. I personally just have, and I mean literally, zero experience with getting trained in this season so far, because melee cleaves just don't exist at the moment. Wizards just keep them down, you know what I mean? Like, Boomkin Demo Ellie, like things like that. They just kind of put like these melee cleaves in the dirt right now. Offensive and defensive, I mean, I feel like we kind of talked about this time and time again. It's really hard to, I think, use a lot of offensive globals in terms of actual damage spells on Resto Shaman, but it is definitely possible to play offensive in terms of positioning when going for lassos, when going for knocks, when going for statics, when going for hexes. Those are the ways you can really help be offensive, more so than trying to, like, flame shock everyone and do a bunch of lava burst damage. So yeah, just look to use those tools. And in terms of comps, I mean, we've seen a lot of, like, I think Shadow Priest Resto Shaman is really solid right now, at least on NA. We've seen Shadow Priest Resto Shaman Rogue with Assassin and Sub. We've seen Shadow Priest Resto Shaman Fury with Arms or Fury. I think it could actually even work with Demon Hunter to an extent. Probably great into casters, but probably not so good into Sub Rogues. And I mean, you could also play Resto Shaman Wizards. You see it with the Shadow play. Probably works with, like, DH Demo, or excuse me, Boomy Demo as well. Basically, any meta comps there are, you could probably plug in a Resto Shaman and do fairly well. But yeah, Resto Shaman is it's a pretty decent healer right now. As long as you're piloting it correctly. The reason why I love Shaman is all the extra stuff, the knock, the lasso, the static. The static is really, really fun. One thing I will say is you need to make sure, like, your static is always moving. They have to be in line of sight of the center of the static. So, like, if I put my static here and moved it to here, it wouldn't work because there's a pillar. But, like, if this is their healer right here, you could definitely do something where, like, you static here and you drag them to here, put them out of line. Maybe put this guy in a root, maybe knock him away, maybe go for a lasso off, maybe go for a hex. But yeah, I hope this helped a little bit. Hopefully you guys were able to get some information, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I appreciate you guys supporting. So yeah.
That's what they call me. I promise that you never be lonely. Be the band, that's what they call me.